Well, the big breaking news is that Donald Trump has officially done it. No longer is it a threat. No longer is it going to happen by this date, but he's actually signed into place his tariffs, causing economic chaos. We're going to get into that, but welcome to The Grudge, the weekly podcast where political enemies discuss the news. My name is Luke Beasley.
And my name's Isabella Moody. Let's get straight into it.
Let's do it. So as a MAGA yourself, I am interested to see what you think about some of the news because this seems so clear-cut bad. Fact sheet: President Trump imposes tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China. And the justification here is that, I'll just read it, the extraordinary threat posed by illegal aliens and drugs, including deadly fentanyl, constitutes a national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And then he talks about how, for some reason, that means we're going to implement 25% additional tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico and a 10% additional tariff on imports from China. Energy resources from Canada will have a lower 10% tariff. Now, one thing some of you might not know that's important to remember, the impact of Canada's response could be massive. I'll show you some of the initial reports about what they're thinking about doing because, for one thing, energy was brought up there. Canada is actually the largest foreign importer into the United States of oil. So them cutting off that, which was one thing they talked about, could be disastrous for us. Why Trump is making such enemies with our friends, we don't know. But before getting your take on that, a little bit more reporting about this. At his Mar-a-Lago resort and residence, South Florida, Trump hit Canada and Mexico with 25% tariffs. Obviously, with U.S. companies paying extra taxes whenever they import a foreign good, what does that mean? Well, for their business structure to work, they then have to pass that on to the consumer, which is the fear about massive price spikes. More breaking news, Midas Touch saying that, according to the New York Times, president of trade group that oversees Canadian manufacturing operations of Honda and Toyota, says automakers on both sides of the border will quickly shut down assembly lines under new tariffs. So this could hit the auto industry. Let's see here. First give me your initial take. Are you as afraid as I am of the economic aftermath? I'll show you Canada responding to this in a second.
Just like gender, according to the left, I'm on a spectrum of being afraid of the economic crises. So if you guys tuned into the Culture War episode that we were on together, Phil asked me a very great question. He goes, Isabella, you have not talked a lot. Let me see your input on tariffs. And I go, damn, Phil, I don't know shit about tariffs. Okay, so now I've tried to educate myself on the tariffs. I'm kind of against them for the most part. I can kind of see some pros, but I mean, as someone that tends to want to shrink the government, tariffs are essentially another tax on the American citizens. The consumer prices do go up, as you've said. The trade wars could be sparked. Right. However, we did look at Colombia, and Trump announced he would place an emergency 25% tariff on all goods imported from Colombia after the Colombian government turned away the U.S. military aircraft of detained citizens or migrants, and then tariff was quickly rolled back after the Colombian president announced he in the U.S. would overcome the impasse and that his country has agreed to receive deportees. So there is a pro to it, to where you could actually get other countries to agree to your terms. So there is a pro, but I tend to be against it.
Yeah.
Yes,
heard.
Please.
Thank you for saying that. A little
Heard.
note. A little note on the Colombia thing. There was a lot of strange reporting where it made it sound like what you said, which is some big concession from Colombia, when they said not that we won't receive deportees, but that if you are flying them here, we want some dignity, so don't shackle them and don't send them on a military plane. And then the U.S. ended up changing the plane and changing thus, because it ended up being a Colombia plane, how they were being transferred. So it's kind of like Colombia got what they want to, but regardless.
Okay, so granting that, do you not think that maybe the 25% tariff could have also influenced the Colombian government to kind of, like they both were kind of give and take? It's a negotiation, right?
But
like
they got what they wanted, which was just dignity. They weren't saying we didn't want to receive. I just, Trump made it sound like they were saying we won't accept migrants. Colombia was saying we just want you to transfer them with dignity. But I will say, of course you can use tariffs as a threat, or then you would have to potentially follow through on it for a certain concession. The strange thing is Trump's not making, in my mind, super clear what it would be. He more thinks, and this is what I've demonstrated on the show for probably years now. He thinks that these types of tariffs is just the way that you benefit us economically.
Right.
It's not just a threat, which is strange. In one clip we covered this week, he got asked, is there anything they could do to stop these? And he went, no, we're just going to have to see what happens, which is a strange way to do a negotiation. Here's a Canadian MP saying Canada is under threat.
We are here this morning, my friends, as an unlikely group with leaders from across the political spectrum who've come together with cultural leaders, artists, academics, athletes, labor activists, and Indigenous militant activists. We represent the incredible regions of our beautiful country, and we are here for one reason. Our nation, our beloved Canada, is under threat. It is an economic threat, but it's also a threat to our values of decency and inclusion. It's a threat to our sovereignty and our very future as a nation. The threat comes, of course, from the President of the United States, a convicted felon and known predator. He's threatening massive tariffs to try and break us as a people. But the threat is also being driven by the hate algorithms of the oligarchs like Elon Musk. And there is the threat from people in our own country who would sell out our birthright to appease the gangster class from Mar-a-Lago. That is not going to happen.
I saw that Canada had said they were going to start with 100% tariffs on Teslas.
That's funny. That's actually funny.
So again, this is, if you think about our top 3 trading partners are Mexico, Canada, then
China?
Mexico, Canada, and China. I'm trying to decide, is China or Canada above each other? But Mexico's number 1.
Top 3, yeah.
Those are top 3, and all 3 of them are being targeted, and 2 of them are really, really close allies that normally we have good relationships with. That attitude, something that it seems like we agree on in terms of the broader economic theory of it.
Yeah.
Use tariffs as a threat, use tariffs as a negotiating tactic, use them as a punishment often for like humanitarian violations, use them for specific reasons that are targeted. But this across the board approach is freaky. And then, okay, do you think that members of your side, I know it's different, you're not one group as we aren't either, but there's a lot of cheerleading going on. And I respect you for saying you didn't know a ton about tariffs. You're reading up on it. And the more you read, you're like, I don't know if the right thing, Donnie. But a lot of people, their support seems strange because they're not willing to admit they didn't know much about it. And they still think that a tariff is like billing China or billing Canada and they're paying us. Trump says he brings in billions of dollars from those countries through tariffs. Do you think seeing prices go up more after he was elected, in large part because prices have gone up, would move anyone on your side?
I think it should. I think that the way the Trump admin should really approach this is stop saying it's an economic argument. Okay, there are some economic pros, right? Like you could encourage more government revenue when it comes to we can raise the revenue for the government and then domestic production.
Yeah.
You can like encourage consumers to buy from like
Make it in
locally in
America,
America,
yeah.
whatever. Putting all that aside, Trump is only promising to impose the 25% tariff if Canada and Mexico do not comply with immigration and stopping the flooding of fentanyl in the country. So stop saying it's an economic gain because it objectively is not. That's what I'm saying. Like I'm with you. It's not an economic. It's not an economic gain. Say, hey, we might need to suffer a little bit to apply the pressure so they stop flooding our country with illegals and stop the fentanyl. Comply with us. Say it's a political pressure versus an economic growth.
Well, that's where I think there's confusion about what the message is, because to your point, we're hearing mixed messages from Trump.
For sure.
Some days he's saying this is how we allow the U.S. economy to flourish. He says that we were our wealthiest back when we had so many tariffs. And so I see what you're saying. Use it as a negotiating tactic. That you might be more okay with, but just as a general economic approach, you're not. I'm wondering when people are rocked by high prices. I will say though, we've seen plummeting just recently, like the last year, luckily, finally, decreases in fentanyl overdose deaths. And that didn't necessitate a trade war, but keep going.
Yeah, and I mean, reports have found that if Trump's main tariff proposals actually do come into effect, it would slash more than a percentage point off the U.S. economy by 2026, and it would make inflation rise 2% next year than it would otherwise have, and that's because a lot of the times there's retaliation. So other countries will impose more of a tariff. So I just think making it an economic argument doesn't make sense. Just let's say what it is. Like, let's impose these things because we want to have better political outcomes for Americans, and it's not an economic win, in my opinion. Today was the first day I've researched it, so this is what I've learned today. And I'm maybe agreeing with a liberal way too much, and maybe I need to rethink this, and I could cringe at this manana, but we shall see.
There are some things where I disagree with the other side, but I at least think they have a way of making a convincing argument. This one, I have yet to hear a convincing argument. Here's Trump at the White House after announcing this was happening.
The European Union has treated us.
Oh, that's the other part. So our three biggest trade partners. Now he's saying also upcoming are tariffs on the EU as well. So, oh gosh.
So terribly.
You promised Americans to try to reduce costs, and so many of the products that would be tariffed when they come into the country, the outgoing country is not paying the tariff. The buyers in the United States pay that, and then that's passed on to consumers in most instances.
So bleak.
Can I just say how it's so refreshing to have a president actually take interviews like this? How many interviews like this did we see under the Biden admin? Come on. It's okay. It's okay. He's gone. We're no longer trying to concede something there. Like, come on. I've never seen an interview like this from Biden. Have you?
I think that.
Yes or no?
No, I will answer your question, I promise.
Thank you.
First, because you know I love my caveats and my trigger warnings.
Oh, yeah.
I don't value.
You love your trigger warnings more than you love your velvet shirts.
I don't think I wear velvet that much, but but it's not. I don't celebrate someone for taking a lot of questions when, from my perspective, every answer he gives is either incoherent or dishonest or both, usually both. But I do agree, Biden did not take questions as much, and that did contribute to people not believing in him and the concerns around him and his age.
Which, by the way, I totally get why the people around him would not want him to do that, because he's clearly in mental decline, and it was sad. So I totally get that. And maybe you don't agree with everything he says, but Trump is a very off the cuff, come interview me whenever you guys want to. Maybe I won't say the best thing. Maybe you guys are the media will take it and run with it and demonize me, but here, I'm going to answer the questions. Here I am, and no, I'm not going to be wait, say what into the earbud? Remember that one time Joe Biden was repeating what he was told in an earbud?
That probably was false, but I will say,
according to him. Anyways, let's continue.
Last thing before playing the rest of the clip. I think a lot, strangely, and I mention often how notable, distinct his makeup is, or bronzer, whatever it is. Is that something that anyone on the right notices? Whenever it's white up until the end of his ear and then it's just orange?
Yeah, I notice it. I'm like, dude, send me the shade. I'm trying to be as orange as you.
Oh, gosh.
Come on.
Okay.
He looks great. Come on.
How would you expect to have prices come down?
Could use a different concealer.
Such a broad plan for tariffs.
Hourglass concealer, Trump, I got you.
And what do you say to the voters who want to see you reduce everyday costs?
Well, let me just tell you that I got elected for a lot of reasons. Number one was the border. Number two was inflation, because I had almost no inflation. And yet I charged hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs to countries. And think of it.
Do you hear that? I charged hundreds of billions of dollars from countries. What does that mean? Well, that's not how it works.
You're like what you said earlier. He makes tariffs seem like it's just a simple bill that the other countries have to pay, and not that the American consumer. I get your point there. Okay.
Hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs to countries, and think of it.
Again, I could be wrong.
Almost no inflation.
This is day one of tariff information.
600.
I do appreciate your transparency, because I know some people in the audience will be like, "Oh, well, then why?" Well, no, we've gone over a gazillion examples on the show of people. It's not even mean. I think a lot of liberals didn't know until this came up prominently, just because rarely has it been such a point of conversation, tariff, and hearing him repeat over and over and over that I charge other countries. I get how people believe the incorrect thing. So a very viral thing to do is go out, ask a Trump supporter, what's a tariff? And then be like, that's not what it is.
Right,
so,
yeah.
At least
and
you read up on it before you talked about it.
That's what happens in politics. We hear these certain buzzwords thrown around all the time, like tariff. So we know exactly what our political party's talking points in favor of it, or the opposing party's talking points against it are. But what is it actually?
Yeah.
Like, I had to humbly Google, what is a tariff today? Because we don't talk about these things enough. And that's, you know what? I'm never going to claim that I know everything. I know I need to learn so much more. So here I am, humbly here, America's servant.
And I do think when we ask
Mother Teresa of our time.
Why is MAGA not mad at him for doing this?
Some of them are. The more libertarian end.
They said the egg prices was what they cared about. And now he's making everything more expensive. This is kind of why.
Listen, the more libertarian wing of the party is very against tariffs.
I saw Rand Paul, saying that.
No.
So that's good.
$1 billion of money from other countries. And
again, I'm pausing so much. It's not any tariff. Like, you can use tariffs strategically and effectively. It's just, we're going to slap a massive one across the board with no end in sight, with no economic plan on our three biggest trading partners. That's, you targeted tariffs, like in sectors that we believe we need to have more U.S. manufacturing for national security reasons. There's reasons, but this doesn't make sense.
Tariffs don't cause inflation, they cause success. They cause big success. So we're going to have great success. There could be some temporary short-term disruption, and people will understand that. I had that when I negotiated some of the good deals for the farmers, and unfortunately those deals have been led astray by Biden and his people because they didn't enforce the deals.
So he is admitting there's going to be a short-term disruption, which we're just going to see.
Only time will tell. We'll see the results.
Only time will tell. Moving on from that, and by the way, I know if you're in the audience, you're probably watching and you're thinking, okay, we've talked now a lot about the potential impact. Now they're actually signed. What does that mean? I've shown you different estimates. This many thousands of dollars more you're going to spend per month, or this many hundreds of dollars. We don't know because right now it's the weekend. We're really going to have to see how does the stock market react? How do all these different policies from the other countries end up being implemented and respond? And I will keep you updated.
We will keep you updated, guys.
Yeah, mostly me throughout the week, but yes, on the weekend.
Especially on the Grudge. Anyways, pardons. I totally want to get into this.
Yeah? So Donald Trump pardoned 1,500 January 6ers.
Yeah.
And I have no interest in anything you have to say except why he pardoned cop beaters. That's
cop beaters.
I will engage with nothing else until you engage with that. I don't want to hear.
Who are these cop beaters? Because Joe Biden actually freed child rapists and murderers from death row. And he also granted a total of over 8,000 people during his term. So Biden can free child rapists and murderers from the death penalty. But there was no one that was a J6 prisoner that killed anyone.
Well, people, because of the trauma that they experienced that day, ended up dying. But
can you show me the case where there was cops being beaten to death?
Yeah, or people because of the trauma they experienced on that day, including being beaten.
No, you said
died.
Cop beaters. After. Cop beaters. Can you pull me up the case?
Yeah. So first let me answer your question.
Okay.
One thing at a time. But yes, one person whipped a cop with a metal whip. Another person with iron knuckles, or is that what they're called? And another person brass knuckles. Another person tased the neck of a police officer. Others tried to crush a police officer. So to answer your question, do you know what it is that Biden did to the people that you just mentioned, the first few?
The freeing the child rapists and... You
think he freed them, onto the streets?
No, he took them off of death row.
Okay, do you know why?
Why? Because he's against death penalty.
Okay. So then what do they have to do instead of being killed?
They have to be in prison.
For how long?
Till life.
Mm-hmm.
Still.
So whenever you're in principle opposed to the death penalty... To me, it's for three reasons. Number one, it's estimated that 4% of people are wrongfully convicted. So that means we kill people sometimes who didn't do the thing that they were accused of.
Obviously awful, yes.
So then if you don't have the death penalty, but you put them in prison forever, at least you can right the wrong by releasing them and giving them money. Number two, it's actually more expensive to implement the death penalty because of the legal challenges, extensive due process, and then the types of ways we kill people. It's more expensive than just keeping them in prison for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So it saves the tax dollars. And then Number 3, I actually think that if I knew I was going to be in prison the rest of my life, I'd rather just die. But I would prefer someone who did something terrible to have to spend their entire life being punished for it instead of having the easy way out and immediately having life ended. So because we have that principle, even if you disagree with it, even though it's obviously correct, to compare him putting people in life for prison. What? In prison for life?
Regarding the death penalty?
Okay. Prison for life. Comparing that to Trump literally freeing people who were violent is absurd, shameful, and makes me think less of you.
Awesome. Thank you. So first of all, I do want to go back to these cases that you're talking about. Please show me the cases where they were violent. I want to know exactly what you're talking about. Also, when it comes to the death penalty, this is something I've gone back and forth with in my own head. So I get what you are saying. By the way, you say Biden is so principled on his stance of the death penalty. Well, 10 days before issuing pardons to people like Fauci, General Mark Milley, Cheney, and literally everyone that was a part of the January 6th committee, he said he would only grant pardons to individuals who have committed crimes, who have been prosecuted for crimes. And what's funny is too, like literally right before leaving the White House, he also pardoned all of his siblings and all of their spouses.
Do you know what you're doing right now?
What?
I want to address all of that.
Do you?
There's a word for what you're doing though. It's called a whataboutism. So you're apparently afraid to address what Trump did. So you're just throwing out a separate topic.
Well, no, I want to address what Trump did. I said, like, show me those cases where they were violent, and I'll tell you, like...
Officer Fanone was dragged into the crowd, beaten with pipes, stunned with a taser, and threatened with his own firearm. He suffered a heart attack and traumatic brain injury.
So who did that?
Assailants,
what, J6?
Daniel Rodriguez, Kyle Young.
Was he just pardoned?
Cosper Head, yes.
Okay.
Officer Brian Sicknick. Officer Sicknick was sprayed with a chemical irritant during the riot. He collapsed later that day and died on January 7th after suffering multiple strokes.
Okay,
Assailant, Julian Qatar. I don't know that's how you pronounce his name.
Wow.
Pleaded, stop please for a second.
Okay,
pleaded guilty to assaulting Officer Sicknick with pepper spray and was sentenced to 6 years and 8 months in prison. Daniel Hoggs was crushed in a doorway by rioters and insulted with his own baton.
Hodges.
They're the names. You want to continue?
No, my point is I would want to look at these individual cases like on a case-by-case basis. But
why haven't you?
No.
You seem to have looked into the Biden stuff that's less significant.
I didn't look at every single person he pardoned.
No, but you seem to have read about why wouldn't you spend time reading up on one of the most notable pardons ever done in history?
No, I totally can. This is how my stance is, and it's very consistent. If you want to go assault police officers, even though I'm pretty against the police, I'm very small government, guess what? I would never be arrested for assaulting a police officer because I wouldn't do it, because I know what would happen. Same thing when, people pull out guns and stuff to police officers. We know what happened. So if they actually did these things, obviously you're going to...
They're on video.
You're going to get prosecuted. Yeah, let's do it. I'm not saying they're correct. I'm just saying, like...
You haven't seen footage of January 6th assaults?
0.
Really?
Like these names though that you mentioned.
So if I to go find the exact ones synced with the exact cases that I quickly pulled up for you, will take some time. But it's really easy to go, oh, they were prosecuted, convicted in a court of law, video evidence.
I totally get where you're coming from, though.
And then you pardon them, but you're the Back the Blue party? What?
No, I get where you're coming from. I'm just saying I'd rather look into these individual cases.
Why haven't you?
Well, you said that you have, so show me the videos of the ones that you mentioned. You go on ChatGPT and look up who are these people that were in prison and what they did. Well,
no,
show me the actual video proof.
I would say the burden of proof is on you because I'm saying they were convicted in a court of law after a trial in front of a jury of their peers where evidence was presented in their defense and against them, and they were convicted. So you're saying that, I don't know what you're saying, but it would be on you to prove that those convictions were wrongful, not me to show you that those convictions were well substantiated, because Trump's saying the evidence that they were wrongful is so great that he didn't even say they were wrongful, he just wants to let them off. But you would have to argue to justify it that there were such wrongful convictions, all of them, hundreds, that you have to bring so much evidence to prove that. such that you should like avoid legal accountability with these pardons.
Let me grant you something here that I was kind of trying to grant you before. If you are assaulting police officers, you're going to get prosecuted. You probably are going to go to jail. We all know this. Putting those cases...
Should you be pardoned for?
I don't know.
You know what's interesting?
No, but this is like,
Okay.
I'm trying to make another point. Putting those cases aside, what about the people that did not commit any violent acts to anyone during January 6th? I sent you a video of a father being reunited with his daughter.
I told you, because similar to how you brought up Biden, I have noticed, and this is a bad faith way to engage in a conversation, that no one on your side will ever just stay focused on a subject. Like, let me demonstrate for you. If you were to ask me about Biden, I don't need to bring up Trump. I can just answer your question. I don't think Biden should have pardoned some of the people that he chose to pardon. Wrong. He did criticize Trump for preemptive pardons and then did them. Different situation, because Trump has promised retribution against Biden's family. So I understand why he wanted to protect them. But still, I don't think he should have pardoned Hunter Biden, for example. And especially how expansive that was. And then that's a really easy, principled response for me to give. And I can just focus on what you asked. But every time I ask about violent assaulters, it's always, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? Well, we can go to those if there's a thoughtful response to what I asked.
Okay, here's the consistency here. Do not commit violent acts against anyone else.
So it was wrong to pardon them.
I guess so. In those cases, yes. Okay. For sure. I'm with you there. However, it's funny when you say you always have to bring up other things. What Biden did whenever you say something to me about, or whenever I try to say something to you about Biden. Wait, I lost my point here.
You think that I bring up Trump as a whataboutism? Yes,
but you do that on the Culture War episode. You do that a lot.
It depends on what we're talking about. Here, the news that we're responding to is Trump's pardon.
I'm kind of doing, but you guys did this.
In other situations, sometimes I'd be willing to engage only with the thing that's brought up if I knew the person wasn't being really hypocritical.
Gotcha.
So like if you were to go, let's say Biden pardoned someone who assaulted someone. He didn't, but let's say he did, or assaulted a police officer. And if you ask me about that, I might go, wait, before I answer that, are you consistent? Are you also mad at Trump?
Right.
Because if not, you're dishonest, and I don't know if I want to talk to you. But if you go, oh, no, I hate that Trump did that too, then I would go, okay, well, then I hate that Biden does that, which is my stance regardless. I'm not going to change it. But I like to test if people are consistent sometimes, which is maybe what you are perceiving as whataboutism. But
we do that
luckily,
to each
Biden
other.
didn't pardon any people who assaulted police officers.
I see all the points you're saying regarding trying to call out the hypocrisy. However, Joe Biden did issue a lot of preemptive pardons for people that were never actually found to be criminal of certain charges.
Which I agree is unprecedented. And
Trump, why didn't Trump do that in 2021, right before he left the office when he knew he was leaving? Why didn't he do that?
Yeah, because back then he thought it would be way too politically damaging to pardon people. Because if you remember back then, everyone was denouncing January 6th. Everyone had different stance.
That is hilarious.
It is.
That is so funny. Happening? Luke, come on. Like literally your entire argument against Trump, like his biggest thing was how he would not accept the results of the election, the elector scheme, no peaceful transition of power. He was going all in. Like that's one of the, by the way, one of the biggest.
You remembered all those key terms.
I remember that. Okay, I remember a few things. Yeah. That was one of the biggest criticisms from people on the right that were like, "Why didn't you pardon the people from January 6th?"
Wait, how is my response weird? Obviously, Trump in that moment was more ashamed. Do you remember after January 6th, he came out and did that speech and he was like, "Okay, actually, maybe we'll do a transition. I don't know," and he finally, because of that imagery, was publicly shamed enough where he kind of left in disgrace. That's not an environment where you feel comfortable pardoning people who did that. Whereas now he's built up this whole narrative about them being treated poorly and blah, blah, blah.
The two-tier justice system.
He's riding on a political high, so he feels like he has more capital politically to spend. Are you asking because of the preemptive pardon? It would have been a preemptive pardon? Is that why you're saying that?
Yeah, like if he were to pardon the J6ers in 2021,
that's what you're asking.
Like that's what I'm saying. Like
because
you mentioned,
Biden did that.
Right?
Oh, because there was no reason to believe, despite you disputing this, that there would be a wrongful, baseless pursuit of retribution against his followers. Y'all don't believe that, and you think there was incorrectly, but Trump has literally said we're going to go after Biden's corrupt family, or Mark Milley in times gone by, the punishment would be death is a phrase he said about Mark Milley. He's talked about Fauci being locked up, or at least a lot of the MAGAs have. So it's, even though I agree, I'm like uncomfortable that Biden, with certain of the pardons he did, I definitely immediately when the news broke said I didn't support the Hunter Biden pardon. But it's a different scenario when Trump has promised. He said, I am your retribution. He's talked about going after these named people. Like, why did Biden pardon his sister? That's a good question, because Trump never mentioned Biden's sister. But people that Trump specifically said he's going to target. Trump gets asked, will you wrongfully target Democrats? And he goes, well, they did it to me. So even if you believe that they did that to him, as I don't, you would be saying you want him to do the very thing that you believe is wrong, which is politically targeting people.
No, I don't think he should do that.
Right.
And under Trump, who was in prison, who was prosecuted under him, that were his political opponents, in the complete opposite way, like, so who were political prisoners under Trump during his first term? You can't even name anyone. Like, who was actually prosecuted? But when you go under the
political prisoners under Biden.
Right, because how many people were pardoned? Like, there was like over 1,500 J6 people pardoned.
Who broke laws?
Okay, we talked about how if they were violent, okay, fine, like you're going to be prosecuted, you're going to be a criminal.
But still trying
However,
to
not all of them were violent. Even my arch nemesis, Isabella DeLuca, was pardoned.
Yeah.
Trump, why'd you pardon that hoe? Come on. Anyways, there was also 23 pro-life political prisoners who were sentenced to prison under Biden. And these prisoners were found guilty of federal civil conspiracy and violating the freedom of access of clinic entrances, the FACE Act, just because they were trying to stop people from going and killing their babies. They didn't hurt anyone. They were just protesting outside of a Planned Parenthood. 23. Those people,
missing parts of that story.
The point is these 23 people, these 23 pro-life activists were in prison under the Biden-Harris administration because the Biden-Harris administration actually targets their political opponents, unlike Trump, because you can't even name anyone that was actually in prison under Trump that was a political opponent.
I don't think Trump, he had mentioned to different people, by the way, you did it again, and you're also leaving out why those people, it wasn't because they're pro-life, but because they're breaking laws by impeding someone's right, which is walking into a building. But whatever.
They didn't impede their rights to walk into a building. They just said, don't kill your baby.
Really? All right, let's research it.
Okay.
Why pro-life?
So they were participating in an abortion clinic blockade in Washington, D.C., October 2020. So you can look it up. Prosecutors argued that Harlow, this is one of the 23 pro-life political prisoners, and others forcefully entered the clinic, blocking doors. So they were blocking the entry ropes in their bodies. She was sentenced to 24 months in prison. But I would love to see like the Trump admin actually targeting people doing certain things and getting them locked up. That's the thing. Like, Republicans actually don't do this. They don't actually enforce the laws against political. He says it, but has he done it? They say he's a fascist. He hasn't done any of it.
Yeah, not locked up yet, but he started because he just got into office. The logistics of that.
He was in office for 4 years. Way more political prisoners under the Biden-Harris administration.
You're wrongly defining them as that. But I'm saying that Trump is right now getting rid of all the people in the FBI who dared to do their job and investigate his case. All the people in the DOJ he illegally got rid of without notifying Congress, inspectors general who do oversight and prosecute corruption. And he has promised, and we'll see what he does. He's had a busy week though with other stuff, like trying to illegally withhold federal funds to different programs. He has talked about media outlets that he wants to go after, but
which I'm against censoring the media. I just want to point out that we can actually give you examples of political prisoners under the Biden-Harris administration. You cannot actually show that with the Trump administration. It's all threats. Has not been done. Let's get into the freezing of the federal aid, shall we?
Among these convicted under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act and pardoned by Trump was Lauren Handy, who was sentenced to nearly 5 years in prison for leading the blockade the prosecutor said resulted in her spraining her ankle. Police found fetuses at Handy's Capitol Hill home. Very interesting. This is Axios. And
keeping in mind that I know that your side of politics doesn't believe this, but the science and people that understand biology understand that life starts at conception.
But that doesn't mean
if you go into an abortion clinic and get an abortion, you are having an innocent human being killed. So yes, we should obstruct that as that's why murder's illegal. But I know we disagree on that, whatever, but that's why they feel like morally obligated to refute. Like, I can't even talk about it as a mom because it makes me sad to think about women going and doing that. Not that I'm hating on them, it's just sad.
So to sort of round out and then we can move on.
Please.
We both agree, pardoning assaulters, bad. We disagree because I do think acts of violating the law, like trying to, impede a session of Congress, even if they didn't commit acts of violence, especially given the magnitude of why they were trying to stop the certification election, is a reasonable thing for them to be held accountable for. And from what I like, Pam Hemphill, who says she shouldn't have been pardoned, she understands she had to be held accountable. She's one of those who switched over. Apparently she watched my show, and did you hear about that story, by the way? There was someone who was at the January 6th riots, went to prison, and then in part because of watching my show is now liberal and does not want Trump's pardon and thinks that she was held accountable justifiably. Y'all will merge long sentences that were given to violent people and act like that's what folks who broke the law but not in a violent way were receiving, which isn't the case. And then and then certain people weren't violent, like Enrique Tarrio, but was the mastermind of the plot to overthrow the government. And he was directing the Proud Boys to do so. And that's a really bad seditious act. So maybe he's not violent, but he was trying to do one of the most destructive things you can do in a democratic society. So I don't remember what I was doing other than summarizing what I went too long.
Well, guess what?
So that's bad. What?
Guess what, Luke?
What?
I'm so ready to move on to the next subject. So this episode isn't as long as the first Biden term. By the way, it made me think it would probably be really great if we had Gavin McInnes on the show, the supposed leader of the Proud Boys. We could totally get him on. We could probably get him in person. That could be fun.
Okay.
But yeah, let's move on. Good job.
Last thing. Funding. You said you're interested in talking about funding?
Yeah, like the
Trump
federal funding freeze.
tried to, which is not something that the president's supposed to do legally. He tried to freeze all federal funds in terms of this is just confusing. With discretionary funds. So Medicare, Social Security. I was about to say non-discretionary.
Wait, what's just... Like, honestly, because I want to know, what does discretionary or like, what's that mean?
Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid.
So that's under the term of what?
Non-discretionary.
Okay.
So those renew every year.
Yes.
Whereas discretionary funds, each year in the budget, the government has to decide what to fund, right? So you would have to you would have to pass a new law to get rid of Medicare and Social Security. Okay. Whereas with other things, if you just choose not to fund them, they go bye-bye. So with the discretionary funds, which is trillions of dollars, Trump announced that all federal assistance was going to be frozen, but there was a lot of confusion, which is a part of the incompetence that I'm critical of, because then it was like, no, it's actually just DEI stuff. But then they would go, oh no, it actually is all federal assistance. And so the nonprofits were freaking out. Personally, I've talked to my mom, all of the people in her world are like, wait, are we about to lose all this funding? And we still haven't got a clear word, but a judge, because it's against the law, implemented a restraining order to prevent Trump from doing that for the time being.
We actually did get a clear word because there was so much confusion. So it does the freeze. It was very confirmed from the OMB, whatever that stands for. The
Office of Management and Budget.
Thank you. They confirmed that the freeze does not apply to any financial assistance going to individuals, and that includes student loans, Pell Grants, Social Security, food stamps, Medicare, and other welfare benefits. Yes, the Medicare patient portal system was Medicaid. Sorry, was down, but that was fixed, and none of the payments, all the payments were still going through. It just took a little bit of time, and people were kind of jumping on that saying, oh no, it was actually freezing the Medicaid benefits.
And it literally did.
Really?
How is it possible with right when that announcement is made in all 50 states, the Medicaid portals go down, and then organizations that get grants from the government are saying we've lost access, and we don't know what's going on. How is that the media's fault, as I've been hearing MAGA say?
It's not necessarily the media's fault. I think that there's three things that could have happened. It could be a technical issue or glitch, and someone could be interpreting the rules in the worst possible way to garnish fear and confusion. And there's also the very common thing of classical bureaucratic mess up. It's a hard word, guys, okay? So everyone wants to jump to blaming Trump, but there's many other things that could be at fault. And by the way, and after that all happened, his own press secretary, his administration said that this does not affect Medicaid. Okay. So none of these issues should be happening.
I agree that
No, that's what happened. If you have individual financial assistance from the government, you're not affected. So it was not on the Trump admin.
The thing that happened, it was. The thing that happened was direct financial assistance is, I guess, being interpreted by the federal government to mean when the federal government sends an individual money, like Social Security. But Medicaid is the federal government sends money to states, then the states administer those services. Similar to most of the money that gets sent out. It's not a check. It's not money that goes directly to someone from the federal government. It's some programs being funded that then people benefit from. And so you even had Caroline Leavitt saying this. Tell me what this means. This was the clarification you were talking about. She said this is not a rescission of the federal funding freeze. It's a rescission of the OMB memo. Why? To end any confusion created by the court's injunction. The president's EOs on federal funding remain in full force and effect and will be rigorously implemented. So
right, because it was being interpreted wrong. And by the way, just
federal funding freeze
from their own words, this is their own words. I can send this to you so you can have it up on the screen. Question, is this a freeze on benefits to Americans like SNAP or student loan? And I quote, you can read along with me.
I know. This is the fact sheet. They say no.
No, any program that provides direct benefits to Americans is explicitly excluded from the pause and exempted from this review process. In addition to Social Security and Medicare,
I agree with you
already explicitly excluded in this guidance. Mandatory programs like Medicaid and SNAP will continue without pause. So what's your point?
I'm agreeing with you. None of those things are what we've been bringing up. So then why did Medicaid have a portal downfall? By the way, because clearly,
oh my gosh, this
someone
is so
in the government, because Trump is wiping out the federal workforce. No, Trump is the one making the federal workforce not efficient because he's clearing it of all the people who have spent their whole career getting good at it. So
it's someone else's fault. He said it would not affect Medicaid, so it's someone else's fault.
You making a policy decision, which is what clearly that memo stated. You making a decision to try to halt trillions of dollars in federal funds and then seeing that is disastrous and then coming out after and going, no, it actually won't impact anything you care about, while it's impacting things people care about.
That's hilarious.
Is saving face. It's not a more reasonable policy. So I agree on some of those programs. They're definitely trying not to touch Medicaid now because they saw the backlash. But a bunch of programs, like hundreds, that are being funded by the federal government, like education or like meals programs, not SNAP, but like Meals on Wheels. Those are being funded through federal grant programs that are a part of this review. Luckily, the court has forced the federal government to stop for now.
Pause,
But it's ridiculous to not see how trying to snap your fingers and just stop funding trillions of dollars of necessary programs when it caused the world to collapse.
What's frustrating is when the Trump admin in this memo clearly states it will not affect something specifically like Medicaid. Will not affect it. And then things happen.
They didn't say that till after.
But they clarified that. And by the way, let me just show you how an example.
Lying.
Okay, right. Why would they say that?
Why wouldn't they say that before in the memo?
Because it said any financial assistance to individuals would not be affected.
Which is not what Medicaid is.
Okay.
That's not what Medicaid is.
And then people claim that since the patient portal was down, by the way, this is from, I know you like to, not to get too heated here, but I know you like to talk about people that are in political power, right? This is Oregon, I can't pronounce the state. Senator Ron Wyden, I don't know, he said, and I quote, that because the Medicaid portals are down in 50 states, this, quote, this is a blatant attempt to rip away health insurance from millions of Americans overnight and will get people killed. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't log into your patient portal? Now you can't go to the hospital and get treatment? Is that a joke? Do you know how patient portals work?
That's how Medicaid interacts with states and then interacts with those administering the services. Of course you would, if that continued day after day, then no longer have access to the program.
So question though, if the Trump admin, even like you said, they didn't clarify in the beginning, even though I think they did, but they clarified after the fact. Why is there confusion? They said, the Trump admin said that it would not affect Medicaid.
Okay.
So where's the confusion?
So the confusion was for 24 hours. A whole
24 hours.
Let me play the clip. For 24 hours, Caroline Leavitt, you can just believe me, but we can pull it up if you don't, got asked in her press conference after they made this announcement, is this going to impact Medicaid? Will Medicaid lose funding? And she went, I'll have to circle back with you. For 24 hours, no one knew, and then all the portals went down. Reasonable to go, you make an announcement, you say you're restricting federal funds, Medicaid goes down, press secretary says, I don't know, I'll circle back.
She should have said no.
Then
it shouldn't
they
be
circled
effective,
back.
yeah.
I think because they realized that would be disastrous, but maybe that wasn't the intention all along.
And maybe it
they
was.
said,
Okay.
and they tried to clarify. Now they've clarified, and this was my follow-up, which is that I didn't ignore that. We all talked about the rescission, and then the rescission of the rescission, and the rescission of rescission. But then they said, these programs are safe, but what about the hundreds of other programs that get federal funds? They haven't told us on those. And so we would have found out really quickly when they lost funding, which they're saying, and there are reports about all the different programs that support special needs folks at schools and to support, all the different things that get federal funding.
No, I want to get into that.
And the court, luckily for now, paused it. So it's either they were trying to do something really terrible and now they're just going to try to do something bad, but they were stopped by a judge, or it's just a bunch of incompetence.
Well, if it's probably incompetence, but if it was so terrible and they said, oh, never mind, then why are you guys still freaking out? By the way, I want to point out that the freeze on these grants used to fund the most, they were like in the past have been used to fund the most insane left-wing stuff.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Left-wing projects. Let's get into it. I sent it to you. You pulled it up. Let's go.
She's gonna say condoms. Go.
By the way, I found this Twitter thread from someone that blocks me on Twitter. I was like, come on. From the Blaze makes sense.
Wait, tell me what you...
Who was Patrick Casey, Josiah?
Tell me what's an example of a crazy investment.
2021, the Biden admin gave $540,000 to, in quotes, transgender equity consulting. This firm is comprised of 6 Black and Latinx transgender and non-binary individuals, one of whom is apparently the first BBW trans porn star.
I can't verify that claim, but there's one that I know you wanna bring up.
No, bring it up. Maybe it's not.
You. I heard you talking about it.
I have this one thread. That's it.
No, wait, what was an example that we talked about it earlier, you remember? Of like what Leavitt said?
I'm wrong too.
She was like, we stopped. They took credit for this freeze stopping a particular $50 million investment.
Oh, the condoms?
Yeah.
I didn't look that into it, honestly.
You're afraid I'm going to fact check you. Stand on your 2 feet.
No, I told you. I saw on the Michael Knowles podcast, it was $250 million to condoms in Gaza. I looked it up. Google, everyone says it's fact-checked to be false. Google always is left-wing biased. I want to look more into it. I was trying to set up my daughter to nap. I'm sorry. She's sick. Are you really going to hold that against me?
Yes.
Anyways, there's so much.
Also, can you find... Let me just say this. It was absurd because they completely fabricated the condom claim. You can just look at the numbers yourself.
The fact that there's a condom claim is a joke.
Take it up with Trump. You're right. He is a joke. But... I'm sure you can find, given how big, just like any big institution I've interacted with and learned about huge corporations that also have just a wacky waste of money. Big, humongous institutions like the federal government of the United States are going to have wastes of money. And I would love to weed those out. But that doesn't mean you freeze a bunch of necessary money that keeps people alive. So while you review,
what money are you talking about that was frozen that would keep people alive?
We're still waiting to find out. But like Meals on Wheels came out and said, we're in a panic. Let's just stick there. Meals on Wheels. I'm assuming whoever's getting those meals.
No, people are going to die because of that.
What?
You're saying that these people will starve if Meals on...
Why do you think people need food assistance?
You're saying that people will die.
I'm not saying they'll die like this, but yes, they'll at least be yes. If people don't have food, they will die. That's how the human body works.
So they need this, and the Trump admin under this This memo will
because
take
there's
it away.
complete and total confusion
Initiated
and
by who?
mayhem caused by the Trump administration saying we're gonna freeze all federal assistance. Was the quote?
Oh, I like how you cut it off there because it's not just all federal assistance. Come on. That is so disingenuous of you.
Continue the quote.
He says that they will freeze all federal grants and loans aiming to eradicate wokeness and the weaponization of government.
That's not the quote I'm talking
So show me
about.
the quote.
I'm talking about the
full thing.
OMB.
It says freeze impacts financial assistance for foreign aid, non-governmental organizations, DEI, woke gender ideology,
talking
and
about
the Green New
something
Deal.
else. Mm-hmm.
No, this is what we're talking about. It has nothing to do with feeding homeless people.
It literally does.
Okay. Oh gosh, we're going in circles. How long have we been filming? I'm sorry, Cole.
Federal agencies, this is the quote, must temporarily pause all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal assistance. Now, they did
No, I
have a
wanna see the
carve
full
out
quote
of
here.
assistance provided directly to individuals. Social Security and Medicare. Everyone said that quote was in there. What does that mean? But all of the grants, they go out. But my point is, even, so yes, if you were to restrict funding from certain organizations, like Meals on Wheels or anything else, or educational grants, you would see implications.
Okay, and by the way, and after that, after the confusion, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt did say that agencies can contact OMB if they feel that the programs that are being affected are necessary and in line. Like they
You see
can
what I
contact
mean?
them though if they feel like things are not.
All right, we're gonna
doing
stop
well.
funding, and then you can come plead your case. What happens in the meanwhile? Housing support was one example of housing assistance organizations that were like, we don't know what to do. February 1st, we have to pay rent. We don't know what to do.
Here, no.
And
okay.
so while they're pleading their case, there are huge impacts. But how do we?
My point here is that the Trump admin
messed
is
up.
trying to decrease the federal waste of taxpayer money. And if this really affects people in these programs that are really affecting people in their states, then they can contact the Trump admin and Trump will work with them. As you saw Trump working with even Gavin Newsom and Chris Cuomo during COVID. He's willing to work with people that disagree with him. So they're trying to cut federal government wasteful uses of our money. Sorry,
luckily,
guys.
a judge
Keep your own money.
Luckily, the judge stepped in, and the defenses of Trump have been weak on this.
The judge stepped in and has halted the decision. Like he's
right because
it hasn't been said, this is wrong, illegal. It's halting until more information is brought forward, and only time will tell. Like everything else,
because it appears to be unlawful. Yes.
Okay, we'll see.
But that's the show. Thank you.
That was fun.
Yeah, that's good.
Let's go.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
All right.
America.
We will see you all. Oh, next week we have a big special project, so look out for that.
So fun.
Yeah.
Fun for you guys, not fun for us.
It wasn't fun for us.
You'll know what I mean.
But we made it for you.
Yeah.
Goodbye.